Hey guys, so I come to you for Volume 2 of DuneTube. DuneTube is a read-along of all 6 of the novels in Frank Herbert's Dune saga. This read-along is hosted by Steve Donahue, Mark of Richardson Reads, Elena Macredina, and myself. We all, the 3 of us who aren't Steve, are making videos on each novel on the 20th of each month. We started last month with Dune, the first novel, and we will end in December with Chapter House Dune. And this month we are doing Dune Messiah, and so today, presumably, we'll be seeing videos from Mark and Elena, but Steve has been doing read-alongs of each of the novels in the saga. So he will do, a quarter of the book per week, and we'll do discussion videos on each section. Whereas the rest of us will try to fit all of our thoughts into one video, which turns out is very difficult. This is like my 3rd time trying to record this video. It's really hard to talk about any of the novels in the Dune saga, just because there is always so much going on. In part, it's because Frank Herbert created such an alien world that needs so much exposition, so to speak. And in part, it's just because thematically they're very complex. But anyway, we're gonna do our best. So Dune Messiah, the novel we're doing this month, the 2nd book, this takes place 12 years after Dune. And at the end of Dune, Paul Atreides was essentially on top of the world. He had taken down the Padishah Emperor. He had destroyed the Harkonnens, his family's arch-enemies who had killed his father. He had millions of Fremen warriors who were fanatically devoted to him, and also the deadliest fighting force in the universe at his back. And he was prescient. He could see infinitely into the future, and could also see infinite versions of the future based on, actions taking place in the present. So yeah, we end Dune on a very triumphalist note. But there are seeds of the dark side of this story in there, and those seeds of that dark side come to fruition in Dune Messiah. And basically this takes place 12 years after Dune. Paul's Fremen legions have gone on a jihad throughout the known universe, have conquered most of the known universe, slaughtering billions, perhaps trillions of civilians and soldiers in their conquest. They have sterilized whole planets, enslaved whole planets. I mean, just an incredibly bloody jihad, all done in Paul's name, because the Fremen regard him as their messiah, and that conception of him by them is reinforced by the fact that he is, prescient and can see infinitely into the future, and is also a mentat, this sort of human computer who can perform immense feats of computation, at the blink of an eye. So that is the world we're presented with. After all these conquests have taken place, Paul has sort of settled into a kind of, I guess, feeling of complacency as emperor, maybe. Well, he may not be complacent, but the empire is kind of complacent. Basically the main thread of plot in this novel is a conspiracy that develops to take him down, to remove him as emperor. And this conspiracy involves his wife, the Princess Irulan, who is the daughter of the former emperor, whom Paul toppled. She's his wife, but not his lover. He won't sleep with her, he won't sire any children on her. His real love is Chani, who is his concubine rather than his wife, because it was politically expedient for Paul to marry Irulan to legitimize his rule as emperor. This conspiracy also involves the Reverend Mother Gaius Helen Mohayim, who, if you've read Dune, you know that name. It involves a guild navigator, Edric is his name, and he is the reason that the conspiracy is able to take place, because the guild navigators have limited amounts of prescience, not nearly as on the level of Paul, but a little bit, and that sort of blurs Paul's prescience, so he can't see that the conspiracy is happening if they discuss it in Edric's presence. And it also involves Skytail, who's a face dancer, who can basically change his appearance at will into anyone. And so that's the main thread of plot. And what I think is really brilliant about the way that Frank Herbert did that plot to take Paul down, if it had been a conventional, like, assassination plot to kill Paul, or, kill Chani so that he couldn't sire any children on her, or something like this, that would have been very anticlimactic, because Paul is prescient, so he would probably see that coming from miles away. What it is it's a plot to psychologically contaminate him, as I think it's referred to in the book, to convince him to step down for personal reasons. And I think that was a stroke of genius on Frank Herbert's part, to make that the crux of the plot, not assassinating Paul or something, or sabotaging some crucial part of the Empire, or something like that. It was this very personal attack on Paul's human emotions and human desires, because basically what they do is they harness the fact that... So what this plot involves is the Princess Irulan administers a contraceptive to Chani, and of course Chani and Paul want to get pregnant because there needs to be an heir, and so Irulan administers this contraceptive so that will not happen. But eventually, Chani goes on to a sort of special Fremen fertility diet, which just involves consuming, like, excess amounts of spice. But it also means that Irulan can no longer administer this contraceptive, so she finally gets pregnant. However, because Chani was on that contraceptive for so long without knowing it, the birth will be incredibly dangerous. She'll probably die. And Paul, with his prescience, knows that she will die. And so, this conspiracy's plan, is to have this happen, have Chani die, and then for the conspirators to offer Paul the chance to revive Chani, in exchange for him basically leaving the known universe and never coming back, and stepping down as emperor. And the way that they can do that is because the face dancer belongs to the Bene Tleilax, who are a sort of male version of the Bene Gesserit, who are a sort of order of super nuns, as Steve says. But the Bene Tleilax, what they can do, in addition to training face dancers like Skytail, they can create kind of almost revenants of humans. They can take the flesh of a dead person and basically create a clone of that person, who doesn't necessarily have it, who doesn't have any of that person's memories, but is physically exactly the same person. And so they can do that with Chani. Now the catch is that with a Gola, that's what they're called, Golas, like ghoul, sort of. With a Gola, they don't remember their past, and so if they were going to revive Chani in that way, it wouldn't be a very useful bargaining chip, because she would look like Chani but be kind of an empty vessel, right? But another thing that occurs is the person that they do revive in this way is Duncan Idaho, who we met in Dune, and who will appear again in the next novel. And I haven't read past Children of Dune, but I've heard that he becomes even more important in the later novels. But what the conspiracy arranges is for the Bene Tleilax to revive Duncan Idaho, which they have done. And Duncan Idaho doesn't remember that, and have his memories as Duncan Idaho. His name as a Gola is Hayt, Hayt. And he doesn't have any of Duncan Idaho's memories, but he looks like Duncan Idaho and has sort of his personality. And they present Hayt to Paul as a gift. As a gift that there's a sort of brief facade that it's a benevolent gift, but then Paul asks Hayt why he's there, and he immediately says outright that he's there to destroy him. And it's done differently than you might expect. There is a sort of inkling that Hayt is conditioned to stab Paul with a knife, but that's not the important part. The crucial thing is that Hayt is conditioned to stab Paul with a knife when Paul says something. a certain phrase that Paul says, a specific phrase after Chani dies. It's the trigger for Hate to cut him down. But what happens is that Duncan Idaho, the man Duncan Idaho that we met in Dune, would never have done that. He would never harm Paul, because as we learn, he regarded Paul as the son he never had. So basically what happens in the moment where Paul utters that phrase and Hate is about to kill him, the sort of Duncan Idaho that presumably is buried somewhere deep in him says, "You cannot do that. This is the son you never had." And from that point forward, he is Duncan Idaho once again. He has all his memories back, and he is functionally the Duncan Idaho we knew, or that Paul knew. We didn't really get to know him very well in Dune, but that Paul knew. And so once that has happened, the Bene Taliks have more of a bargaining chip, because they show him, well, look, this Gola recovered all of their memories and is now essentially the same person. We can do the same with Chani, but only if you will leave the Empire, leave the universe, leave the known universe forever, and give up your throne. And they threaten him too, but with the lives of his infant children who've just been born. Literally, there's a scene where an agent of the Bene Tlalak is holding a knife over Paul's infant children, saying, "This is the bargain. You better take it, or I'm going to kill them." And Paul manages to kill that agent with a little help from the infants, who are preborn. They are preborn like Alia, Paul's sister, so they have all the knowledge and abilities of reverend mothers. And his son, Paul's son, reaches out to him and allows him to use his eyes for a second. And the son is obviously in the cradle, looking right up at this guy holding a knife over him. And so Paul uses that sight to kill the agent. And that is a brilliant stroke on Frank Herbert's part. Like, it's kind of incredible to think of how he came up with that. Because the plot would have had to be something like that, because it couldn't be a conventional political ploy, because Paul would see right through that. It had to be an appeal to his human emotions for Chani. And I think that I really hastily judged Dune Messiah. And a lot of people do this. They come to Dune Messiah and are a bit shocked by how slow and brooding and philosophical and cynical it is, because Dune ends on such a triumphal note, that they don't know what to make of it and decide that it's bad. And I think that happened to me too. But this time around, it was like a totally different book I was reading. This is my third time reading it, by the way. That's crucial information. It was like reading a different book. This book focuses so much on these human desires that these characters have. Duncan Idaho, he would never kill Paul because he regards Paul as the son he never had. That's a very human emotion. Paul wanting to be with his wife, very human. And also Paul being distraught by seeing that his wife will die. That's also very human. Alia, Paul's sister, who's preborn, who sort of grew up very different from most kids, because she basically was born with all the powers of a reverend mother. There's a few very moving scenes where she tells Duncan Idaho, or Hate, that she doesn't want this. She just wants to be normal. And even Princess Irulan, who's in on the conspiracy. A large part of why she's in the conspiracy is because she is secretly in love with Paul and wants to bear his children, basically. Wants to really be with him, wants to be his lover, wants him to love her. And so I think that that's just a brilliant stroke that makes this story so much more powerful than it may have otherwise been. And makes it more powerful emotionally than Dune, I think. I think it focuses on those human aspects of these characters much more than Dune does. Dune is much more about sort of fireworks, giant sandworms, huge battle, seeing into the future. It's all, it's like a sort of Star Wars, a bit more philosophical version of Star Wars, although it was, of course, written before Star Wars. Whereas this is more... If these were Dostoevsky novels, if these were Dostoevsky novels, Dune would be Crime and Punishment, and Dune Messiah would be Notes from Underground. Okay? Crime and Punishment is an incredibly gripping book, with this, which also has these deep philosophical themes, and really explores Raskolnikov's psyche very deeply. But still, it's, like, incredibly gripping. Notes from Underground is not gripping. It is basically a philosophical essay made into a novella. And I'm not saying that that's what Dune Messiah is, but Dune Messiah is much more of the Notes from Underground vein, in being much more about ideas, but also about human emotions, in a way that I guess Notes from Underground really isn't. So, yeah. I feel like... I don't know. I love Dune Messiah. I loved Dune Messiah this time. So, yeah, I would love to hear what you all thought of it. You know, were you underwhelmed by it, like so many readers tend to be, or did you like it? Yeah, I think that's kind of what I have to say about Dune Messiah, and, yeah, I don't know. It's great. It was kind of... My mind is kind of blown by just how wrong I feel like I was the first 2 times I read it. Yeah, I mean, I think it's every bit Dune's equal. But anyway, I'm going to start rambling, because I think I got out most of what I wanted to say. And this video has gone on long enough. So, anyway, next month we will be doing Children of Dune, which I do love, which I read and loved before. We will see how it fares this time. And, yeah, I mean, give me your thoughts if you had them, if you read it, and, anyway, I will talk to you all in my next video. Bye, guys.